Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews. This being a show where I talk about dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Family Law. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I hope this isn't one of those episodes where someone, when it originally aired, it isn't one of those episodes that immediately got rid of as like, oh my god, this is awoke and people are super dismissive of. I hope it isn't one of those cases, because I think it is a very important story to kind of share and tell, with Aaron, who wanted emancipation from his family. At first it seems like, he's bringing up micro-transgressions and stuff like that. And even Abby's like, he's a kid that's too woke for his own. Because she's someone that's kind of that same ilk, personality-wise. But then finally understanding what Aaron's circumstances really are when he talked to Lucy. Like, he's gay, and the fact of the matter is his parents aren't okay with it. And I think this episode does a really good job of capitalizing on the complexity of that. It is because in my mind, my mind has always been like hey, if your parents don't accept you, screw them, you be you, which is still true, but it's not it's easy for me to say that when it's like, I'm not in that situation. My parents accept me for who I am, but I'm also not, I'm not in that same situation, and it's like, how do you tell someone to just kind of give up on their relationship with their family? I mean, especially the complicated thing of your parents are supposed to be the ones who look after you, who are supposed to be there to support you, love you unconditionally. And it's like, this one thing ends up being the thing that not only it stops them from loving you, but it also makes them kind of almost despise a part of you. And, that leaves Aaron feeling conflicted. Like, how am I feeling the way he does, but then it's also like, that guilt that's kind of built into him because of everything around and everyone around him telling him, you're wrong for feeling the way you do. Something's wrong with you. It's unholy and stuff like that. Kind of having Jesus thrown in his face. Because I think, because it isn't an all across the board thing. Because obviously with religion, there are people across, it's a spectrum of it where people people who you can be Christian, but still also be supportive of the LGBTQ community. And like I said, there's also the other side of things where it's kind of like Aaron's mom, who is super steadfast in her beliefs, who believes whatever you need to do to make the gay go away, So it isn't a whole, it's not a conversation about everyone who's religion, but there is a chunk of religion that does not support, someone just being themselves, no matter what form, that may be, and that's a heartbreaking situation. And I like the way this episode balanced that, because showcasing that it is it's not so pure black and white, because the moment Aaron's parents found out about it, how they both reacted, his mom was you have to be aggressive with the treatment. It's chemo with cancer. And it's wait, did you just compare your son being gay to having cancer? But his father struggled with it, because it's I love my son, but I wasn't expecting that camp to, because even he was coming from the perspective of my son's going to have a hard time in life. So it is this thing of it's a misguided attempt to I want what's best for my child. You're just kind of going about it the wrong way. You're misguided, you're misinformed, And I think for the episode to shift into what it did, especially for Abby to reach out to Lucy, using Lucy as an example, it's okay. And she was yeah, this is my sister Lucy. And even Lucy was almost because Abigail never really just refers to her as that. And it's yeah, she's a successful businesswoman. She's this, she went to Stanford, she's got this great job and this career, and she's gay. And it's and the difference is she had my father's support. That's how she was able to kind of keep going. Which that's also a point of contention. It's both her and Daniel when it comes to Lucy, because it's your daddy's a little girl, you're the one that he cherishes. Because even both of them kind of feel yeah, Abby got the worst of them, the biggest amount of neglect, but even Daniel kind of feels it, where it's yeah, Lucy gets special treatment. So it's kind of she is kind of the golden child. She's the one that their dad, I think it's also I think I also feel the commonality with Lucy too, in regards of yeah, we're the babies of the family. So I think we both kind of get that same treatment as the babies of the family. Because it's yeah, your parents kind of go through their ebb and flows of what, when you have, I'm literally in the exact same situation, because she has two older siblings. I have two older siblings, like two older siblings, two sisters. So I think that's probably why that kind of even resonates more, like why it makes sense and why that happens. But either way, the fact is that Aaron's parents even sent him, like I said, to that camp, and them being like, "Oh, you can't be gay and Christian," and like for them, it's like it's an oxymoron. But like I said, it can coexist. You, like I said, it's just like there's a spectrum when it comes to religion. It isn't all black and white. For a lot of people, they see the shades in gray. For some people, that's not the case. It's just it isn't all across the board. But there is a very largeable chunk of people, religion in general, that does not support, someone being gay. And the fact is, luckily Cecil went undercover and was able to, showcase all that. Luckily, he knows his rights, and he was like, "Yo, I'm getting out of here. Leave me alone." Like the way he rushed out with Aaron, I was like, "What did it?" Because they were like, "Oh, we want to see you," because he wasn't doing anything. All he kept doing was touching Aaron, and that's what triggered them, because they're like, "Oh, they're secretly whispering, he's touching," and like, cause they're thinking, "Oh, it's so sinful." And what did they kept saying? Using bullshit, being like, "Oh, you were sexually abused. That's why you were that's why you're thinking like this. That's what this is." Like, "Oh, he was like, "No, I wasn't sexually abused." The fact is that, and the sad thing is, that is some people's mentality. That's why I say I hope when this episode originally came out, it wasn't a lot, because the way the world is, like, there are going to be people just like, "Oh my God, look at this woke propaganda." It's like, but these are true stories, that there are people who, like, I think, like I said, I do believe it is an important story to tell. And also, like I said, also show the flip side of, like, right, a side of, with Lucy and everything, a side of, like, hey, here's someone who had probably both of their parents' support. Like, we really lean into, like, their dad, because probably by the time Lucy came out, her mom wasn't around anymore. Because, yeah, she was, like, 8 when her mom died, right? But at least Aaron kind of gets his father's support. It's still kind of like, right, he's figuring things out. Even he's like, "Yeah, my dad's probably not going to be like bearing any like P flags." But he found out I have a boyfriend, kind of nearly fainted. But he's here, because I was like, that's a complicated thing. Because I was like, how do you handle that? Like, the father, like Aaron's dad, wants to help out and be supportive, but it's like, your wife is super against it, so they're moving out, because she's very steadfast in her beliefs, and I don't know if she can change. But his father is malleable enough that he's like, "All right, I've been, because that's also the thing too. When you've been raised in an environment like that, when your religion's probably been a big part of your life, and you've heard that same thing being given to you over and over again, like, eventually you kind of adopt that, and just, but it's so ingrained in her that she's unwilling to change, but the father at the very least is. So I think that's a beautiful thing, And I think it especially means a lot for Abby with everything she's going through, seeing a father who said, like, right, I said I love my son more than anything. I think I needed to prove, I need to show that I don't just talk the talk, that I can walk the walk as well. And it means a lot for Abby with everything that she's going through this episode. Obviously, like, the shame of knowing, like, she relapsed and everything. And her father's just like, right, I should report this. But Jerry's like, no, like, why is it that, you were so hard on your own daughter? And I think even he had to kind of take a step back. I was like, yeah, because it's like you took her in because you wanted to help her. He's probably like whether he'll realize it or not, subconsciously, he probably did take her in for the purposes of trying to help her, try to get, like, build some relationship with her, because he does care about her. He just hasn't always done the best job of showing it. And once again, time and distance can really change things, because it's like, right, he could be like, when we had Abby, we were young and I didn't know what I was doing, and yeah, messed up with Daniel as well, but he tried to overcome, like, tried to make up for it with Lucy. So it is that thing of, years and wisdom has changed his approach to things, so he's not the same person that was an absentee father. There's still those elements to it, but it's not as, I don't think he's as bad as he was beforehand. But and even Jerry mentioning, like, hey, you gave me a second chance. So I was like, oh, so I wonder, is Jerry's vice the same thing as Abigail? So it's probably like, that's why it probably strikes even more of a chord. Which even later on, Jerry was trying to be nice, but Abby was like, "Don't be nice to me." But she's like, "I do appreciate it," because she knows, like, you're the one that talked to my dad. You're the one that helped out in this situation. So, and obviously she's keeping it below board. Like, obviously no one's supposed to know. And obviously she took the breathalyzer, and luckily everything worked out because she was able to, drinking enough water overcompensate, like, I think flushed her system to some extent. But then later on, she had to get a test again. Like, the technician came twice because the first one was inconclusive, which I should also talk about that, because I've talked about this before, in regard of, I know that this show is edited for the CW. I guess, like, we try to squeeze in more commercials here in the US than they do in Canada. Just because, like, to basically put in perspective, that scene, because I looked it up, because I was like, the fact is, it immediately went to the next scene of, like, Lucy and Aaron talking. I was like, especially when they're like, oh yeah, that lab tech came back. There's an extra scene that was completely edited out of the CW version. Basically, it's her talking. I tracked it down and it's her talking to her about, like, oh yeah, it was inconclusive. And it's like, oh yeah, it must be because I was drinking too much water. It's like, oh, I'm always happy to help, happy to pee in a cup. She's like, no, it's a test. It's a tube or something like that's what she was saying. But yeah, entire scene was removed. Does it change anything? No. Because later on, Daniel references like, oh, yeah, that technician stopped by twice. So the context is there, but it's still like, it messes with the ebb and flow of the episode. And once again, and I think that's why they cut it, because it's such a minor thing, that it's such a weird thing. Like, because the scene's only like, what, maybe a minute and a half, but it's like, that's another minute and a half of commercials and stuff. I was like, man, that's so weird. Just because the episode's a little bit longer and it doesn't fit the normal, like, 41, 42 minute runtime that's necessary here in the US for an hour-long show, just so you can fit in that many commercial breaks and stuff, you know? So I think it's such a weird thing. Because I noted that before, that there was, because usually, and just from what the little research I've done, or just these first few episodes, I know at least with the second episode, and now this episode, I've actually looked into it. It's literally been like one scene, like maybe like a 1 minute or so scene. That's why they feel like they can cut it, because it's like, right, it's one scene. It's not really, but it's still just like, it messes with the ebb and flow of the episode to some extent. Because I'm like, because I guess it's like, right, watching the episode, you're like, oh, that's kind of weird that they never circle back to that. It's like, oh, they did. That scene immediately transitions into, like I said, Abby talking to that lab tech person who's come to get her pee, and then it's like, and then it moves into that Lucy and Aaron talking. But you watching the CW version, you just assume like, oh, it just flows like that. It's such a weird thing. I don't know why and like I said, I think Coroner is in the exact same way. I think I haven't done as deep of research, so I don't know if, like, but I feel like there's some instances where I kind of feel like there have been things kind of removed from those episodes, just cut for time type of thing. It's wild to me. So I'm sorry going on such a tangent, but either way, Abby gets confronted by Frank, who's like, oh, have you been drinking? She's like, wait, what? Why would you even think that? He's like, the fact is like, you sent this text to Felicity, stay away from my husband, you count. I was like, okay, huh. It's like, yeah, you can't go around calling people counts. But there's that conversation about how she's like, you're still like interacting with her. He's like, yeah, but she's my peer and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, but really, like, you should have blocked her. Like, what? He's like, I left a comment. It's like, but that's also the thing. Like, why you, like, to me, that's where we kind of get into that territory of like, yeah, but that's hypocritical. Like, Abby's entitled to feel the way she does. Like, don't comment on this lady. I wanted to bail you out, give you the slightest bit of bail last episode, being like, maybe it was someone else using your account. But you even admit it, like, no, it was me. I'm like, that was so stupid of you. Like, no. She has every right to feel that way. Like, why would you do that, you idiot? You know, this is the woman you cheated on your wife with. One night stand or not. Like, that's where it is the thing of like, yeah, she's getting demonized. Yes, Abby has her issues, but she even brought it up. It's like, right, I am trying my best, but what about you? Like, what is your skin in the game? And he's like, you're right. And what does he do later on? He goes behind her back and is like, oh, these therapy sessions, they're lies. And it's like, oh, there you are cutting corners. You even do the little bit. It's like, I get it. It's the tough love thing. It's what she needed, the kick in the butt to do what she needs to do. Yes, but I'm also like, you're a hypocrite too. Like, you're not, like, I think the bare minimum you could do is not contact the woman you had an affair with, peer or no peer, block the lady, don't comment on stuff, and especially because like one of the comments had like an emoji or something, so I'm like, what is your function, my dude? That it's like, it doesn't seem like you're all that keen about getting back with Abby, because you also moved the goalpost of being like, oh, well, let's revisit this once you've gotten to the 3 months of sobriety. Once again, I get Abby's like messed up, like she messed up, she had some issues, but it's like, just like Harry's giving her a hard time, so is Frank. And once again, it's a tough love thing, but I just feel like it just bothered me so much the way he jumped down her throat. And the fact is, you even went behind her back to check. He's like, yeah, I have connections too. Like, the fact is that you bothered checking up on her, like, but she knew she didn't have a leg to stand on because she knew, like, right, I canceled those appointments. Because he's like, oh, does going to work mean more to you than your appointments and stuff like that? It's like, you know, but yes, she wasn't taking the work serious. So it's that give and take of like, oh, you're right, but you went about it in the most frustrating way to be right. And it's like, I don't know, it just rubbed me the wrong way. He's 100% right, but it's still like, he's still douchey in the way he went about it. I don't know, it rubbed me the wrong way. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm just too, like, I'm too sympathetic in the case. Because also, we've only got that one peek into Abby's, like, drinking. So we haven't seen, like, how bad things were before the affair. Because he's like, yeah, her affair, like, her drinking and stuff is what pushed him to, like, have an affair. I'm like, I don't know, man. It rubbed me the wrong way because it just felt like he was vilifying her. Harry, I get it because it's also like, right, they haven't had the best relationship. Also, his business is going to be in trouble, like, if it gets found out about her circumstances, which Daniel did figure out. He's like, right, she's wearing a whole bunch of perfume. She looked like she was hungover, all the drinking water, and technician had to come back twice. It's like, yeah, she's probably drinking. And it's like, oh, should we tell Dad? He's like, I think Dad already knows. And she's like, what? No way. It's like, yeah, now you're finding out that you're not the only daughter that Dad looks after, which I guess that's going to rub Daniel a little wrong too, because it's like, right, Dad chastises me about my pro bono cases, but then like here you are drinking and you kind of get a pass, just like Lucy gets a pass. So he feels probably even more so like an outsider, especially because it's like, right, I'm one of the children you actually kept around, and now you've bent over backwards. I mean, you brought her into the first place, and now you're also like covering for her. So I think that's gonna, and even Abby was like, oh, I thought we were actually getting along, and it's like they kind of were, but now it's like, oh, you kind of try to come in here and stab me in the back trying to get me fired with Dad. It's not the first time, he did it before too. So, and him and Lucy were talking behind your back, you know, a couple, like, and one in the first episode maybe, you know, so it's like, but like I said, I think her and Lucy are in a much better spot, but it's not like their relationship is 100% great, but, you know, I think it's better than what it is between her and Daniel. It's definitely better between her and her, than it is between her and her dad, but there's just so many elements to that, so. Which, speaking of, Harry did get to play the full role of a grandfather this episode, which I thought was pretty interesting. He really didn't seem like, he was so out of his element, he didn't really know what to do. And even, it's like, oh, so why haven't you wanted to be in our life? It's like, no, I've tried to, but your mother didn't want me to. And it's like, oh, okay. And it's like, yeah, things were complicated between me and your grandmother. We were young. And she's like, that was your excuse? He's like, it's pretty weak, huh? And she's like, yeah. And it's like, well, my friend, her grandparent tries to buy her love. And Harry was like, does it work? She's like, you won't know until you find out. And he gives her money. She's like, wow, I'm glad you're not dead, Grandpa. And he's like, yeah, me too. So, but he really likes it because it's, once again, it's his way to also subtly connect with Abigail, but it's also because it's him like trying to make up for the fact that he wasn't there for Abigail. He recognizes it, but I think for him, it's been so long and there's so much complicated history there that he probably feels like any attempt to reach out would just fall flat because I didn't do my job, and now like it's a little too late to kind of just come in wanting things to be fine. I think is what's really I think that's really the issue here. But like I said, he still is going a little above and beyond to protect his daughter. He's like, right, I have saved your bacon twice, so. But when Daniel brings it up, he's like, I think you should focus on your own work, bringing in cases that actually make us money rather than focusing on your sister, Daniel. So, but like I said, at the end, she is actually going to be putting in the work. she ends up going to a meeting with Jerry and everything. And obviously we see like that drinking and like response to stress doesn't come out of nowhere. We see like a lot of that's probably learned behavior from her mom too, because her mom like was kind of like, oh, because you're not drinking right now because of everything. Like her mom like probably found out about like, or saw the way Abby came in and she recognized it. So it's like, oh, I'm not going to have a drink. I'm not going to have a martini. But the moment she found out that Abby made it possible so that Nico and Sophia got to meet their grandfather, that sent her spiraling a bit. So she drunk, and it's like, right, he kind of like blackmailed me. It's like it was part of the conditions of him keeping my. She said, and she kept drinking, left the alcohol out and everything. It's like, you know what your daughter's going through, and she saw that, and that's when she called up Jerry. So Jerry's the only person she could really rely to, because like I think the fact is I doubt her, even because her mom's not like, that's her mom helping out as best she could, because she's trying to be supportive of her daughter. It's like, I understand what you're going through. Here's some pills, like probably like for your hangover, kissing her. But then it's like, yeah, she's kind of drowning out her own sorrows. Because once again, I think she has her own issues too, but maybe it's not nearly as destructive as like heavily, like everyone has their vices on how they deal with stuff. So like, who am I to tell somebody like, oh, maybe you shouldn't lean into alcohol? But like people who've leaned into it kind of go like, yeah, I wish I didn't lean into it as much, because I realized like it's too much of a crutch. And I think her mom might be using it as a crutch. I mean, it was a crutch for Abby. That was her way of dealing with it. Like I said, I think it is learned behavior. Like she got it from her mom, because like drinking was probably like her mom's way of dealing with things too. So, but at the very least, she has Jerry's help, and Jerry has, you know, as we've kind of learned in this episode, Jerry's been through this herself. So having someone there who's like also got your back and your best interest involved, and who's also been through this as well, like having someone like that by your side, close enough to that you can turn to, that you can rely on, that you can lean on as you're trying to actually put in the work, you know? I think that's kind of a beautiful thing. So how this plays out going forward with her mother and her dad, like that's going to be interesting. And what kind of effect this is going to have on Abby's relationship with her mom after this, like whether she's still going to hold a little bit of a grudge against her for it. But we'll ultimately have to wait and see where everything ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.